How long can you hold your breath? No, really, how long can you hold your breath? In a couple of moments, I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath. And at the top of the inhale, you're going to close your mouth and hold. So you don't need to make any major adjustments. Seated just as you are, I'd like you to take a deep breath in. Hold. No letting sneaky bits of air out your nose. Try and soften your shoulders. Drop your chin to your chest if you need to. Close your eyes and hold. Notice how that feels. Is it comfortable? Uncomfortable? What thoughts are in your head? And just notice. Be there in the breath hold. And breathe. Big breaths in. Relax. Big breaths in. Everyone's still with me. How did that feel? Comfortable? Uncomfortable? Doesn't matter. Because either way, you are all on your way to become freedivers. Freediving is the sport of holding your breath underwater. It's measured in time, in distance, and in depth. So I can hold my breath for 5 minutes and 59 seconds. To put that into perspective, think of the song Bohemian Rhapsody. It's pretty long, isn't it? But to give you a scope of what's possible, the world record for a female breath hold is 9 minutes and 2 seconds. But freediving isn't just a breath hold party trick. Freediving is a way to see below the surface. And for me, freediving has been a way to get to know myself. Now, all of myself, even the parts that I barely dare speak of aloud. Let me tell you a little bit about my life before freediving. I was in my early 30s. I was single. I was back living with my mum and dad, having received the all too familiar email of 1 month's notice. I was working for myself as freelancing as a puppeteer, as a movement director, as a drama teacher, as a voice coach, as a choir instructor. My work had me geographically all over the place, and mentally probably just as scattered. So my friends, my peers were meeting their partners, getting engaged, buying houses, having babies, going back to college to start their second career. And I, in comparison, had a very battered Ford, a boot full of puppets, sheet music, and stained travel mugs. It felt like there was a giant checklist, and I couldn't manage to tick off just one of them. It's probably important to mention at this point that underpinning all of this was mental illness. So it had doctors, symptoms, diagnoses, hospital stay attached to it. But I think this morning it's enough to say it was disruptive, detrimental, and it manifested in damaging thoughts being whispered in my ear that when it came to that checklist, maybe I wasn't good enough. I don't know about you, but it's really hard to know where to go with something so insidious being whispered in your ear. So I went traveling. And through these travels and a series of adventures, I found freediving. So it started off as a really cool activity, and it gave me even better pictures. But then it became a sport. I could compete in it. But then it morphed into something that allowed me to come back to myself again and again. It helped me build a bridge between my body and my mind. It helped me reconnect the two along with a sense of trust. But most of all, it helped me uncover a sense of strength and resilience that I thought, having a mental illness, I was automatically disqualified from. Breathing, being in the moment, and observing without judgment. These are all pillars of freediving. So suddenly, this seemingly very extreme sport was actually teaching me more about how to live above the water. At the end of 2018, I was back in Ireland. I was single again. I was living in probably an eccentric house share. I was really feeling the pressure of that checklist of what I should be doing, and probably more importantly, how I should be doing it. And I was battling my old pal, depression. The smallest tasks required maximum effort, and any attempts at progress felt like moving through quicksand. And then 2 things happened. I was in an accident that left my leg quite badly burned, and my friend died tragically. I turned 36, 4 days after her funeral. The next week, I remember sitting on the couch, in pajamas stained with yesterday's dinner, surrounded by empty mugs and probably just as many biscuit wrappers. And in a moment that I can still remember like a photograph, I knew that something had to change. Anything. I needed a structure. I needed something that would help me move, however slowly, forward. It was around this time that I heard about the Freediving World Championships, and they were to be held in Nice the following year. The very prospect shook me to my core. So that's exactly what I decided to do. The preparation would require me to put myself out there. Me. Not a company I worked for, not someone else's business or someone else's dream. Me. It was exposing, I felt vulnerable, me alongside some of the best athletes in my sport. Who do you think you are? Reverberated in my head, angry and indignant. It was terrifying. But worse than that was the feeling at the end of November that nothing changes if nothing changes. And I still knew something had to change. In 2018, I became the first person to represent Ireland in the Freediving World Championships. Now, there's a really big gap between that and the girl who was sitting on the couch in a haze of depression and grief. And I would love to stand here and tell you that the journey was an inspiring montage of me training first thing in the morning, running up flights of steps to arrive triumphantly at the top with the towel draped around my neck. But that would be an absolute fib. It was messy. So very messy. It was 1 step forward and 7 steps back. It was paved with so many moments of pain in the stomach level of imposter syndrome. So I broke it down into steps. I focused on one task, and then the next, and then the next. And I hoped that by the time I got to the next phase, I'd have learned enough to help me deal with the challenges. I leaned on the pillars of freediving, using your breath to control or calm your body and your mind, to slow your thoughts down, and to observe each moment as it came without judgment. But my story might be about freediving, but my message isn't. I am not advocating that we all grab a snorkel and mask and head to the nearest body of water, I promise. My message is about acceptance. Accepting exactly where you are at that moment without judgment. My message is about challenge. How can you move yourself forward? And my message is about getting out of your own way and finding out what you're truly capable of. Very recently, I wrote a book. So you can imagine the thoughts that went along with that. You don't even write, no one's going to read it, the usual, who do you think you are, blah, blah, blah. So I met up with a friend of mine, and she's an author, someone whose writing I respect and I admire. And I asked her somewhat funnily, so how do you write a book? She paused, shrugged, and finally answered, just write from your soul. I had been looking for something more along the lines of a dummy's guide to writing a book. But her advice replayed in my head. It replayed when I was in bed at night. It replayed when I was boiling the kettle to make my cup of coffee. It replayed when I was opening my laptop to start writing. Just write from your soul. To be honest, there is so much noise in there that I don't even know what my soul would say if I could hear it. So I asked another question. Who do you want to write this book for? And the answer came loud and clear. I wanted to write the book for that woman in her 20s and 30s who was having the legs taken from underneath her, and each time she was struggling to get back up. I wanted to write the book for the woman who, once upon a time, stopped herself from putting herself forward, from doing the things that she loved, from being around the people that loved her, all because a voice in her head, a thought bouncing around told her, "You're not good enough." My message is about hearing those thoughts, acknowledging them, and asking, what if you are good enough? What if you do deserve it? What if you put yourself forward and you get it? What if this very thing sets your soul on fire and fills you with such joy you can't even imagine it right now? I would love to go back to the me of 10 years ago and ask her these questions. And full disclosure, I'll probably have to serve as a reminder to the me of 10 years' time. I want to reach anyone who needs that little bit of a nudge to get through that initial barrier of fear that often comes with changing things up. I want to whisper in their ear. I want to shout. Give it a go anyway. And while you're at it, try an approach of curiosity. Because that curiosity can coexist beside fear. That curiosity might even take fear by the hand and gently oh so gently redirect it. By sharing my, at times, messy, but also wonderful journey, I want to show not necessarily the way through, but just remind that there is a way through. And how a little bit of bravery and a lot of vulnerability can go a long way into making an ordinary life pretty extraordinary. Thank you.